The Gallery of Broken Dreams. Welcome to my story. Hello everyone. Welcome to Twisted Heartstrings. Before we begin, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Today I'm sharing a story that will touch your heart and make you believe in justice. My name is Elena Martinez, and at 58 years old, I thought I had lost everything. But I was about to discover that sometimes life saves the best chapter for last. Please comment below with the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story reaches. The invitation that changed everything. The envelope arrived on a cold Tuesday morning in March. It was expensive paper, the kind that felt smooth and important between my fingers. I recognized the handwriting immediately, my daughter Victoria's perfect, flowing script that she had practiced since childhood. Mother, it read, I would be honored if you attended the opening of my first solo exhibition at the Westfield Gallery this Saturday at 7 p.m. This is an important night for my career. Please try to look presentable. Those last 4 words stung like a slap across my face, but I had grown used to the small cuts Victoria delivered. It had been 3 years since my divorce from her father, Marcus Wellington, and in that time, my relationship with my only child had crumbled like old paint on a forgotten canvas. I lived in a tiny studio apartment in the old district of the city, where the rent was cheap and the walls were thin. My neighbors were artists, musicians, and dreamers like me, people who had chosen passion over profit and paid the price for it. My space was filled with canvases, some finished, most abandoned halfway through. Painting had once been my entire world, but somewhere along the way, I had lost the confidence to create. Marcus had made sure of that. Preparing for the gallery opening, I spent 3 days deciding what to wear. My closet held clothes from another lifetime. Dresses I'd worn when Marcus and I attended charity galas, when we smiled for cameras and pretended to be the perfect couple. Most of them didn't fit anymore. Stress and struggle had changed my body, made me thinner, and somehow both harder and more fragile at the same time. Finally, I settled on a simple black dress that I'd bought from a consignment shop. It was elegant enough to blend in, plain enough that I wouldn't draw attention. I paired it with my mother's pearl necklace, the only piece of jewelry I'd kept from my former life. Everything else had been sold to pay rent, to buy groceries, to survive. Saturday evening came too quickly. I stood outside the Westfield Gallery, watching well-dressed people stream through the doors. Luxury cars lined the street. The gallery's windows glowed with warm light, and I could see champagne glasses glittering in people's hands, hear the buzz of sophisticated conversation and laughter. I almost turned around and went home. But she was my daughter. Despite everything, despite the coldness that had grown between us, I wanted to support her. I wanted to be proud of her. I took a deep breath and walked through those glass doors. The shock of recognition. The gallery was more crowded than I expected. At least 100 people wandered through the white-walled space, admiring the paintings hung with perfect precision. Classical music played softly in the background, mixing with the clink of glasses and the murmur of cultured voices. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, though I knew I wouldn't drink it. My hands needed something to hold, something to keep them from shaking. I moved along the wall, looking at the paintings, and that's when my world stopped spinning. The first painting showed a woman dancing in the rain, her red dress swirling around her legs, her face tilted up toward the sky with pure joy. I knew every brushstroke of that painting. I knew it because I had painted it 15 years ago in the studio Marcus had built for me in our old house. It had been inspired by a memory from my childhood in Barcelona, dancing in the summer storms with my grandmother. My hand trembled as I looked at the signature in the corner, Victoria Wellington. I moved to the next painting, then the next, then the next. Each one was mine. Each one had been created by my hands, born from my imagination. Painted during the years when I still believed I had talent, when I still believed Marcus supported my dreams. There was the landscape of the olive groves from my hometown. There was the portrait of an old man playing guitar, modeled after my father. There was the abstract piece I'd created during my darkest depression, all bleeding blues and violent purples. Every single painting in this gallery had come from my soul, but they all bore Victoria's signature. The public humiliation. Mother, you actually came. Victoria's voice cut through my shock. She appeared beside me, stunning in a silver gown that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Her dark hair was swept up elegantly, and she wore diamond earrings that caught the light with every movement. She looked like success, like sophistication, like everything I used to be before I lost it all. Victoria, I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. These paintings, I need to talk to you about. Aren't they magnificent? She interrupted, her eyes shining with pride. I've been working on this collection for 3 years. The critics are saying I'm one of the most promising young artists in the city. Daddy's so proud. Daddy. She still called him that, even though Marcus had destroyed our family. Victoria, listen to me, I said, gripping her arm. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. These aren't your paintings. These are mine. I created every single one of them. You took them from my studio when your father and I separated. You stole my work. The change in her expression was instant. The warm smile froze, then melted into something cold and hard. She pulled her arm away from me, as if my touch burned her. What are you talking about? She said loudly, loud enough that people nearby turned to look. Mother, are you feeling all right? These are my original works. I've been painting for years. No, I insisted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. That painting there, the woman in the red dress. I painted that when you were 10 years old. You remember, you sat in my studio and watched me work on it. And that one, the olive groves, I painted that the summer we visited Spain. Victoria, please, you know the truth. More people were gathering now, forming a circle around us. I could feel their eyes on me, could hear the whispers starting. My face burned with embarrassment, but I couldn't stop. These were my paintings, my life's work, and seeing them displayed with someone else's name felt like having my identity stolen. Ladies and gentlemen, a familiar voice boomed across the gallery, and my stomach dropped. Marcus appeared through the crowd, immaculate in a tailored suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. He looked exactly as he had when we were married, confident, commanding, and completely in control. He walked straight to Victoria and put his arm around her shoulders, a protective father defending his daughter. Then his eyes met mine, and I saw something flicker there. Not guilt, not shame, something worse, amusement. I apologize for this disruption, Marcus said to the crowd, his voice smooth and concerned. My ex-wife Elena has been struggling with some mental health issues since our divorce. She's become fixated on the idea that she's an artist, when in reality, she never painted anything more than amateur hobby pieces. The crowd murmured sympathetically. I could see it in their faces, they believed him. Why wouldn't they? Marcus Wellington was a respected businessman, a philanthropist, a pillar of the community. And I was just a broke, desperate ex-wife making wild accusations. That's not true, I said, my voice breaking. Marcus, you know I painted these. You watched me create them. You told me they were beautiful. You promised to help me get them into galleries, and instead you... Elena, he interrupted, his voice dripping with false kindness. You're embarrassing yourself and our daughter. Victoria has been studying art for years. She has receipts for all her supplies, documentation of her creative process, photographs of herself working in her studio. What do you have? Jealousy? Delusions? I have the truth, I whispered, but my voice was so small now that barely anyone could hear me. The painful exit. Security. Marcus called, and 2 large men in black suits appeared from somewhere in the crowd. Please escort Ms. Martinez out of the building. She's clearly unwell and is disturbing the guests. No, wait. I tried to protest as hands gripped my arms. Please, just look at the paintings. Really look at them. The technique, the style. Ask any expert, and they'll tell you these weren't painted by the same person who did Victoria's student work. Please, somebody believe me. But no one was listening anymore. The security guards were already pulling me toward the door. I caught one last glimpse of Victoria's face. She was crying. But they were perfect tears, the kind that made her look vulnerable and sympathetic. Marcus held her close, comforting her while the crowd gathered around them both. I was pushed out onto the sidewalk, the glass doors closing behind me with a final, definitive click. Through the window, I could see the party continuing, people already returning to their champagne and conversation, the awkward incident forgotten. Inside that beautiful gallery, my life's work hung on white walls with someone else's name attached. I stood there on the cold street for a long time, not knowing where to go or what to do. Cars passed by. People walked past without seeing me. I had never felt more invisible, more erased from existence. Finally, I started walking home. The The tears didn't come until I was on the subway, pressed between strangers who pretended not to notice the middle-aged woman crying quietly in the corner seat. The unexpected visitor. My apartment felt even smaller and sadder when I returned. I turned on the single lamp by my easel and looked at the half-finished painting sitting there, a landscape I'd been working on for months but couldn't seem to complete. What was the point? If I couldn't even convince my own daughter that I was an artist, what did it matter what I created? I made tea with shaking hands and sat by the window, watching the lights in other apartments flicker on and off. Somewhere out there, people were living happy lives, celebrating their children's successes, proud of their families. I had none of that anymore. The knock on my door came at almost midnight. I assumed it was my neighbor Mrs. Chun, who sometimes forgot her keys. But when I opened the door, a stranger stood in the hallway. She was a woman in her mid-40s, elegant and striking in a way that made my small, shabby apartment seem even more depressing. She wore a long coat that looked expensive, and her dark hair was pulled back in a sophisticated twist. Her eyes were kind but sharp, the eyes of someone who missed nothing. "Elena Martinez?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "Who are you?" "My name is Isabella Romano," she said. "I'm an art collector and curator. May I come in? I have something very important to discuss with you about your paintings." My heart started beating faster. "How did you know where I live?" "I've been looking for you for quite some time," she said gently. "Please, Ms. Martinez, what I have to tell you will change everything. But first, I need you to trust me enough to let me through your door." I should have been more cautious. I should have asked more questions. But something in her eyes told me she was telling the truth, that she really did know something important. And after the nightmare I'd just experienced at the gallery, I desperately needed someone to believe me. I stepped aside and let Isabella Romano into my apartment, having no idea that I was about to discover a truth far more shocking than I could have imagined. The truth begins to surface. Isabella walked into my small studio apartment and immediately went to my easel, studying the unfinished landscape with an intensity that made me nervous. She said nothing for a long moment, just looked at the painting, then at the stacks of canvases leaning against the walls, then at the brushes soaking in jars of murky water. "You use a very distinctive technique," she finally said, turning to face me. "The way you layer your colors, building from dark to light. The texture you create with your palette knife in the foreground. And these small, almost invisible strokes of pure color you hide in the shadows. They're like a signature, but better than a signature because they can't be easily forged." I stared at her. No one had talked about my painting technique in years. Marcus had always dismissed it as amateur experimenting, and I'd eventually started to believe him. "How do you know about my work?" I asked. Isabella reached into her expensive leather bag and pulled out a folder. She opened it on my small kitchen table and spread out a series of photographs. My breath caught in my throat. They were pictures of paintings hanging in galleries around the world. One in Paris, one in New York, one in Tokyo, one in London. All of them were my paintings, pieces I had created years ago and thought were lost or destroyed after the divorce. "These paintings," Isabella said quietly, "have sold for over $8 million in the past 3 years. They're highly sought after by collectors. The artist is listed as Victoria Wellington, and she's building quite a reputation in the international art market." $8 million. The number was so large I couldn't comprehend it. While I'd been struggling to pay my rent, eating instant noodles, and selling my belongings, my own artwork had been making millions for my ex-husband and daughter. "But tonight," Isabella continued, "I attended your daughter's gallery opening. I was curious to see this young artist everyone's been talking about. And do you know what I discovered?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. "The paintings in that gallery tonight were painted by a different hand than the ones that have been selling internationally. Oh, they were good enough to fool most people. Your daughter has some talent, clearly taught by someone skilled. But they weren't the same. The technique was similar but not identical. The soul of the work was different." She pulled out more photographs, close-ups of paintings showing tiny details. "See here? These hidden strokes of pure color in the shadows. They appear in all the internationally sold works attributed to Victoria Wellington. But they don't appear in any of the paintings from tonight's exhibition." "I don't understand," I whispered. "What are you saying?" Isabella looked at me with something like pity in her eyes. I'm saying that someone has been selling your original paintings for years, claiming them as Victoria Wellington's work. But tonight's show was all new pieces, and Victoria couldn't replicate your unique style closely enough. That's what made me start investigating. And that's what led me to you. The room seemed to spin around me. All these years, I'd thought my paintings were gone, lost in the divorce, destroyed, or forgotten. I'd never imagined they were hanging in galleries, being admired and purchased by collectors around the world, making money for the people who had betrayed me. Marcus, I said, the name tasting like poison in my mouth. He kept them. He's been selling them as Victoria's work. Not just keeping them, Isabella said gently. I've done some preliminary research, and it appears that when you divorced, there was a clause in the settlement about your artwork. Did you read the divorce papers carefully before signing them? I thought back to that terrible time 3 years ago. I'd been so broken, so desperate to escape the emotional abuse, that I'd signed whatever the lawyers put in front of me. Marcus had promised to be fair, had said he just wanted the divorce to be quick and painless. His lawyers had presented thick stacks of documents, and I'd signed them all, just wanting it to be over. I don't remember, I admitted. I was just trying to survive. I think you'll find, Isabella said softly, that you signed away more than you realized. And I think your ex-husband has been planning this for a very long time. She gathered up the photographs and put them back in her folder. Then she looked at me with fierce determination in her eyes. Ms. Martinez, Elena, I came here tonight because I believe in justice and I believe in art. What's been done to you is theft, not just of your paintings, but of your identity as an artist. I want to help you get both of them back. How? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You saw what happened tonight. No one believes me. Marcus has all the power, all the money, all the connections. I'm nobody. You're not nobody, Isabella said firmly. You're a brilliant artist whose work has moved people across the world. And I'm someone with resources, connections, and a very strong desire to see the truth revealed. Together, we can expose this fraud. But I need to know, are you ready to fight for what's yours? I looked around my tiny apartment, at my unfinished paintings, at the life I'd been living in shame and poverty while others profited from my talent. Then I looked at Isabella Romano, this mysterious woman who had appeared out of nowhere offering me hope. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something spark inside me. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. Not just hurt, though the betrayal still burned. What I felt was something I thought I'd lost forever, the belief that I mattered, that my art mattered, that I deserved justice. Yes, I said, my voice growing stronger. Yes, I'm ready to fight. Isabella smiled. Good. Then tomorrow, we begin uncovering the truth. And I promise you, Elena Martinez, by the time we're finished, everyone will know your name. The masterpiece of deception. Welcome back to the journey. Welcome back to Twisted Heartstrings. If you're just joining us, make sure to watch part 1 first so you understand Elena's incredible story. In the last episode, we discovered that Elena's ex-husband Marcus and her daughter Victoria had been stealing her paintings and selling them for millions of dollars. Now, with the help of mysterious art collector Isabella Romano, Elena is about to uncover the full truth. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below with where you're watching from. The investigation begins. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Victoria's face at the gallery, those perfect tears streaming down her cheeks as she played the victim. I saw Marcus's smug expression as security dragged me out. But most of all, I kept thinking about Isabella's words, $8 million. My artwork had generated $8 million, and I'd been living on food stamps. Isabella arrived at my apartment at exactly 9 o'clock the next morning. She wasn't alone. With her came a distinguished older man in a gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than my car. Elena, this is Thomas Chun, Isabella said as I let them in. He's a private investigator who specializes in art fraud and forgery. I've worked with him on several cases over the years. Thomas shook my hand with a firm grip. His eyes were sharp and intelligent behind wire-rimmed glasses. Ms. Martinez, Isabella has told me about your situation. I've already started looking into your ex-husband's business dealings, and I have to say, what we're finding is quite disturbing. They sat at my small kitchen table, and Thomas opened his briefcase. He pulled out a stack of documents that made my head spin just looking at them. Let's start with your divorce settlement, he said, spreading papers across the table. Do you have a copy of what you signed? I went to my closet and pulled out a cardboard box I hadn't opened in 3 years. Inside were all the papers from the divorce, documents I'd been too heartbroken to look at again. Thomas went through them with practiced efficiency, his finger running down lines of legal text. Here, he said finally, pointing to a paragraph buried in the middle of page 17. This clause states that all artwork created during the marriage and stored in the marital home becomes property of Marcus Wellington, to be managed as he sees fit for the benefit of the family estate. I stared at the words. But I painted those. They're mine. How can you just take them? Because you signed this document, Thomas said gently. And because the law is complicated when it comes to property created during a marriage. However, he held up a finger. This clause specifically says the artwork can be managed for the benefit of the family estate, not sold for personal profit, not attributed to another artist. Marcus has violated the terms of his own agreement. Isabella leaned forward, her eyes intense. There's more, Elena. Thomas, show her what you found about the sales. Thomas pulled out another set of documents. These were gallery receipts, auction records, and bank statements. Your ex-husband has been selling your paintings through various galleries and auction houses for the past 3 years. But here's the interesting part. He's been selling them under Victoria's name, claiming she's the artist. Each sale has been carefully documented, with Victoria signing certificates of authenticity. She knows, I whispered. Victoria knows these aren't her paintings, and she's been lying about it. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Marcus had done. My ex-husband was greedy and cruel. I'd learned that during our marriage. But Victoria? She was my daughter. I'd raised her, loved her, sacrificed for her. How could she look collectors in the eye and claim my work as her own? There's something else, Thomas said, his voice gentle but firm. We pulled Victoria's academic records from the art school she attended. Her professor's notes are quite revealing. He handed me a printed email from one of Victoria's instructors. Victoria Wellington shows promise, but lacks original vision. Her technical skills are adequate, but her work feels derivative, as if she's copying someone else's style without understanding the emotional depth behind it. Grade, B-. Another email from a different professor. Victoria submitted a portfolio piece that seems far beyond her usual skill level. When questioned, she became defensive and refused to explain her creative process. Recommend investigation for possible plagiarism. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. They knew. Her teachers knew she was copying someone. But they couldn't prove it, Isabella said. And Victoria was careful. She only submitted smaller works, practice pieces. She saved your major paintings for the commercial market, where there's less scrutiny from people who knew her as a student. The depth of betrayal. Thomas continued laying out evidence, like a prosecutor building a case. Bank records showed regular deposits into Marcus's account from gallery sales. Email exchanges revealed him coaching Victoria on what to say when collectors asked about her creative process. There were photographs of Victoria in a studio, Marcus's studio, I realized, posing with my paintings as if she'd created them. But the worst discovery came when Thomas showed me a recording he'd obtained from a gallery in New York. This is from 6 months ago, he explained, setting up his laptop. A collector was interested in purchasing one of Victoria's paintings. The gallery owner recorded their conversation for insurance purposes. He pressed play, and Victoria's voice filled my small apartment. I hadn't heard her speak so candidly in years. On the recording, she sounded confident, professional, nothing like the cold daughter who barely spoke to me anymore. Tell me about your inspiration for this piece, the collector asked. This painting represents my journey as an artist, Victoria replied smoothly. I wanted to capture the feeling of displacement, of being caught between two worlds. The woman in the painting is dancing in the rain, free from societal expectations. It's deeply personal to me. My hands clenched into fists. That painting was about my grandmother, about our summers in Barcelona, about memories Victoria never experienced. She was selling my story, my memories, my heart as if they belonged to her. The recording continued. Your technique is remarkable for someone your age, the collector said. The way you layer the colors, the hidden strokes and the shadows, it's very sophisticated. I studied under several masters. Victoria lied without hesitation. I've been developing this technique since I was a teenager. It's my signature style. Thomas stopped the recording. The silence in my apartment was heavy with anger and grief. She's not just selling your paintings, Isabella said quietly. She's erasing you completely, taking your memories, your technique, your identity as an artist, and making it all hers. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray morning sky. For 3 years, I'd blamed myself for the distance between Victoria and me. I thought I'd failed as a mother, that somehow I hadn't been good enough, successful enough, worthy enough of her love. Now I understood the truth. Victoria had needed me to be nothing so she could become everything. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why would she do this? I would have helped her. I would have taught her everything I knew. She didn't have to steal from me. Money, Thomas said simply. Your ex-husband's business has been failing for years. He's drowning in debt. The art sales have been keeping him afloat. And Victoria? She's enjoyed the fame, the recognition, the lifestyle that comes with being a successful artist. Neither of them wanted to give that up. Isabella came to stand beside me at the window. Elena, I know this hurts, but this information gives us power. We have proof of fraud, of forgery, of systematic deception. The question now is, what do you want to do with it? I turned to face her, wiping tears from my cheeks. I want them to face consequences. I want the truth exposed. But more than that, I want my identity back. I want the world to know that I'm the artist who created those paintings. Then we need to be strategic, Isabella said. We can't just go public with accusations. Marcus has money and lawyers. He'll fight dirty, claim you're mentally unstable, that you're making false claims for attention. We need irrefutable proof. What do you suggest? I asked. Isabella's smile was fierce and determined. We set a trap. A beautiful, elegant trap that will force them to expose themselves. The plan takes shape. Over the next several hours, Isabella and Thomas laid out their strategy. It was brilliant in its simplicity and devastating in its potential impact. Here's what we know, Isabella began, pacing my small living room like a general planning a battle. Your paintings have a distinctive style that Victoria cannot perfectly replicate. The international art community is starting to notice inconsistencies between early Victoria Wellington works and her recent pieces. I've been hearing whispers, Thomas added. Gallery owners, collectors, art critics, they're starting to ask questions. Why does Victoria's technique seem to have changed? Why do her new paintings lack the emotional depth of her earlier work? So we give them an answer, Isabella continued. We arrange for one more Victoria Wellington painting to come to market. But this one will be created by you, Elena, with every step documented. I felt my heart start to race. You want me to paint something new? Your masterpiece, Isabella said, her eyes shining with excitement. The painting that will prove once and for all who the real artist is. We'll document everything, video recordings of you creating it, photographs of each stage, expert witnesses who can verify your technique. Then we'll enter it into a prestigious auction under a pseudonym. Victoria will see it, Thomas said, picking up the thread. She'll recognize the style immediately, and she'll face a choice. Stay silent and let another artist seem to copy her work or claim the painting is hers, which will lead to questions she can't answer. Either way, Isabella finished, the truth comes out. If she stays silent, we reveal that you painted it and prove the style matches the old Victoria Wellington works. If she claims it, we have video evidence showing you created it, and we can demonstrate that she's been lying all along. It was risky. It was complicated. But it was also the most hope I'd felt in 3 years. There's one problem, I said quietly. I haven't created anything significant in years. What if I can't do it? What if I've lost my ability? Isabella walked over to my easel and picked up a brush, holding it out to me like a sword. Elena Martinez, you haven't lost anything. Your talent was never dependent on Marcus's approval or Victoria's validation. It's in your bones, in your soul, in every breath you take. All you need to do is remember who you are. I took the brush from her hand. It felt right, like coming home after a long journey. How long do I have? I asked. The Belmont Auction House has a major event in 6 weeks, Thomas said. It's the most prestigious art auction in the city. If we can get your painting ready by then, we can enter it under a pseudonym and create the perfect stage for the truth to be revealed. 6 weeks. It had taken me months to complete some of my best work. But looking at Isabella's confident face and feeling the brush in my hand, I knew I could do it. I'll need supplies, I said, my voice growing stronger. Canvas, paints, proper lighting. I've been working with cheap materials because that's all I could afford. Consider it done, Isabella said. I'll have everything delivered tomorrow. The finest materials available. This painting will be perfect in every way. There's one more thing, Thomas said, pulling out a final document. We need you to sign this affidavit, stating under oath that you are the original creator of the paintings currently attributed to Victoria Wellington. It's legally binding, Elena. If you're lying, you could face serious consequences. I didn't hesitate. I took the pen he offered and signed my name with a flourish. I'm not lying, I said firmly. Those are my paintings. Every single one. Rediscovering the artist within. The supplies arrived the next afternoon. Isabella hadn't been exaggerating about quality. The canvases were professional grade, stretched perfectly tight. The paints were from an exclusive Italian manufacturer, each tube a small fortune. There were brushes of every size, palette knives, mediums, and varnishes I'd only dreamed of using. But it was the easel that made me cry. It was a professional studio easel, solid and adjustable, the kind I'd always wanted but could never afford. Isabella had set it up near my window where the light was best, and she'd added professional lighting for evening work. This is too much, I protested, overwhelmed by her generosity. This is an investment, Isabella corrected gently. When your work is properly attributed to you, when you receive the money that's rightfully yours from those past sales, you'll pay me back if you wish. But for now, just paint. I stood in front of that blank canvas for an hour, brush in hand, too afraid to make the first mark. What if I'd forgotten how? What if the magic was gone? What if Marcus had been right all along, and I was just a mediocre artist who got lucky a few times? Stop thinking, Isabella said from where she sat reading in the corner of my studio. You're in your head too much. Just feel and paint. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Images began to flood my mind. Not planned compositions or technical considerations, but emotions, memories, stories that needed to be told. I thought about my grandmother dancing in the Barcelona rain. I thought about my daughter as a little girl before Marcus poisoned her against me. I thought about the woman I used to be and the woman I was becoming. When I opened my eyes, my brush was already moving across the canvas. The painting emerged over the next 4 weeks like a flower blooming in fast motion. It was unlike anything I'd created before, more raw, more honest, more painful and beautiful all at once. The central figure was a woman, but not dancing this time. She was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out over a vast ocean. Her back was to the viewer, but you could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hair whipped in an invisible wind. Behind her, the landscape was torn and fragmented, pieces of different scenes, a destroyed gallery, scattered paintings, broken picture frames. But in front of her, over the ocean, the sky was beginning to clear, light breaking through storm clouds. I called it reclamation. Isabella documented everything. She set up cameras to record my process, took photographs of each stage, brought in art experts who examined my technique, and gave sworn statements about the methods I used. She was building an unbreakable case, and I was creating the evidence with every brushstroke. On the 30th day, I added the final detail, a small, almost invisible stroke of pure crimson in the shadows of the cliff face. It was my signature technique, the one Isabella had first noticed, the one Victoria had never been able to replicate. It's finished, I said, stepping back to look at my work. Isabella stood beside me, and I saw tears in her eyes. Elena, this is extraordinary. This is the work of a true master artist. Anyone who sees this will understand immediately what's been stolen from you. Thomas arrived the next day with paperwork for the Belmont auction. The painting would be entered under the pseudonym Yem Ramirez, a name that meant nothing to anyone but used my real initials. The estimated value was set at $200,000 to $300,000, high enough to attract serious attention, but not so high as to seem ridiculous. The auction is in 2 weeks, Thomas said. I've already started spreading rumors in the art community about this mysterious new artist whose style is remarkably similar to the famous Victoria Wellington. Victoria and Marcus have definitely heard about it. How do you know? I asked. He smiled grimly. Because Marcus's lawyer called me yesterday, asking questions about Yem Ramirez. They're nervous. They know this painting could expose them. The emotional toll. As the auction date approached, I found myself struggling with unexpected emotions. Part of me was excited, eager for justice and vindication. But another part of me grieved for what I was about to destroy, my relationship with my daughter, whatever remained of it. Late one night, I sat looking at old photographs of Victoria as a child. There she was at age 5, covered in paint after helping me in my studio. There she was at 10, proudly holding up a drawing she'd made. There she was at 15, before Marcus's influence had completely taken over, smiling at me with genuine love. I gave her everything. I whispered to the empty apartment. How do we end up here?